Hello, everybody. Uh, I said it was going to be 2:30, but I wanted to start a little early because my wife might have to go back to work a couple minutes early. So I want to make sure that I'm upstairs when she leaves. I haven't seen her today yet, and I'd like to. So I want to make sure I'm done with this, and I got a lot to say. So I'm going to start talking about LA and Chicago, like the showdown. I don't know if you're playing all day, but I'm going to discuss it with all day prices, although the showdown prices are relative to that. So I'll be saying like cheap or expensive more than going over specifics. And then I'm going to talk about the main slate. There is, something I want to start off by saying. It's kind of a plug, even though I don't make any money from it. But the lineups page on bathrobesports.com is the best. Hey, Grace, how's it going? Nice of you to join us. It is the best. There are things there that you just don't get from any other site. The splits, which is crucially important. No one talks about it enough. You get the hot and cold, which I go over every day. It's not automated. I actually have to go in and make the decisions myself based on the stats. And then I added recently all of the pitches that every pitcher throws and then what percentage they throw each of those pitches. So, for example, if I'm looking at the Angels and the Cubs game, I know that Cam Bedrosian is the opener. He throws a slider 51% of the time and a four-seam fastball 48% of the time. And he's followed by Trevor Cahill, who throws a sinker 27% of the time, a curveball 24% of the time, a changeup 22% of the time, and et cetera, et cetera. I have all that information now for every pitcher, every batter, every hitter, in terms of splits and hot and cold. I obviously don't have what pitches every batter throws, but you understand what I'm talking about. The next thing that I'm going to add, I just have to figure out how and where to do this, is I would like to give like a good or bad, like a hot and cold color-coded type rating, but for the pitch selection. So for example, obviously this is going to be better for better players. So I don't know exactly how this is going to work out. But if you take Trevor Cahill's pitch selection, Anthony Rizzo profiles exceptionally well against those pitches specifically. So I'm going to get into that more specifically now because that's something that is useful and something that I do look at. But I've figured out now a way to kind of incorporate it in. I found, all that pitcher information, and it's really, really important, especially I have, it's on Fangraphs. You have to dig around. It took me a really long time to find it, but part of what I have set up shows me not up to, how do I word this? Like averaged out to 100 pitches. So I'm going to get out of YouTube here. Well, I'm not going to get out of it, but I'm not going to be able to see it. So right here, for example, so this is, let's start by talking about it, right? Because we're gonna have to talk about this game anyway. I talked about it in my article. If you didn't get a chance to read the article, I am basically off all of the pitchers here. There is an error in pricing for Cam Bedrosian. He is the most expensive player on the showdown slate, even though he's an opener who's going to get maybe 2 innings, but most certainly 1 inning. So that's absolutely ludicrous. You cannot play him. And then Cahill and Lester are both really, really cold lately. And this game has a high enough total that I really don't want either. I think both are going to be overly popular. So this is one where I am looking at bats. So any ability to differentiate the bats is going to help, right? So, let's look at the splits. The best people in terms of splits right now are Tommy La Stella, who is a lefty with reverse splits against Lester, a lefty with reverse splits. As I've said many times, a reverse versus a reverse, if you're the same hand, is a huge bonus to the hitter. So Tommy La Stella gets a big bonus there. And then on the other side, we have Cahill, a righty with normal splits. So we have Bryant, Baez, and Contreras, who are going to get the biggest boosts in terms of splits, right? Next, let's look at hot and cold. On the Angels, we have Fletcher, Trout, Pujols, and Puello. Oh, and Calhoun, who are all hot. None of those overlap with La Stella, but Lucroy is the only one who's cold. So we have La Stella, who's not hot and not cold, and has the splits advantage over here, right? Then on the Cubs, we have Rizzo, who's hot, and then Hayward and Addison Russell, who are also hot. So none of the people with splits advantages are hot right now. On top of that, Baez and Contreras are actually cold right now. The only one that's neither is Bryant. So as of right now, that says that Bryant is a good play, Rizzo is a good play, Baez and Contreras probably not because of the recent form, and then a whole lot of Angels are looking really good so far, except for Jonathan Lucroy. And then let's dig into this part, because this is the new part that I'm going to talk about today that I've been, dealing with over the last a while now. But like I said, I didn't really know how to talk about it. I didn't have a stat that I liked that was good enough, but I found this one on Fangraphs. And like I said, it averages the amount of runs created per 100 pitches seen. So if Chris Bryant sees 100 four-seam fastballs, he would create 2.5 runs. What they say is that in this, a 2 is really good. Oh, it still has La Stella on the Cubs too. That's funny. Yeah, I have 2018 and 2019 because I wanted extra information here. So some of these are not going to be on the Cubs anymore, but again, you can look at how all the Cubs work against every pitch. So let's take a look at Trevor Cahill, right? Trevor Cahill is going to be the main pitcher for the Angels. Let's ignore Bedrosian. Cahill throws, again, a sinker 27% of the time. So we go and we look, and the batters on the Cubs that create the most value off of a sinker are Javi Baez, who creates 2.4 runs per 100 sinkers, and Anthony Rizzo, who creates 2.3 runs per 100 sinkers. That is really, really good. So we have Rizzo and Baez right now, and that's another boost to Rizzo. And a boost to Baez, who might be in a get-right spot here. That's what that's telling me. The next highest pitch thrown by Trevor Cahill is the curveball, which he throws at 24%. So again, I wish I could share my screen. So I go here and I look, and again, out of 100 curveballs, Javi Baez creates 3.7 runs. Anthony Rizzo creates 2.9 runs, and then nobody else is even close to them, just like with sinkers. Edgar says, on showdowns, I notice at times some people take relief pitchers in utility spots, but how would someone know who's coming in to relief a starting pitcher? It is a huge risk and reward play. Basically, you have to guess. You have to guess, like, this guy's going to go X amount of innings, and then if he gets blown up, the long reliever is going to come in, so I'm going to play the long reliever for the Cubs. Or I think the Cubs are going to win by 2 runs, so I know that the closer is going to get it, and so I'm going to play the closer. Or Lester only gets 7 innings, and they're going to have the lead, so let me play, the setup guy from the Cubs, who's only 4,000. So it is really, really risky to do something like that, especially, with teams that use openers. It's going to be nearly impossible, because especially, like, take the Texas Rangers, who are moving like Leclerc and Chavez and all these guys in and out of the starting position. They can pitch anywhere at any time. So it's a lot tougher to do that. And I wouldn't, if you're playing like 150 lineups, I wouldn't mind taking the risks there. But I wouldn't just do it just to do it, because the odds are you're going to be hurt really badly by doing that. Grace, the stat I'm talking about on FanDuel, so for example, the curveball per 100, the weighted runs created per 100 curveballs is, I'll type it because it's easier to see. The CU means curveball, although I call it CB on my lineups page because curveball should be CB. So the only other pitch that Cahill throws over 20% is the changeup. Yeah, no problem, Grace. Cahill throws the changeup 22% of the time. So look at who creates the most runs off the changeup. Rizzo, 2.2 runs created off the changeup. So all three of Cahill's primary pitches, Rizzo averages more than 2 runs created per 100 of those. Rizzo is not that way against every pitch. So this is not, something that, everybody looks great in this way. This is something that, Rizzo just happens to match up exceedingly well. Now, the thing that we look at, Baez, who had looked good, has a created of 0.82, which is still good. It's not negative, but not nearly as good. So with Baez, splits looking really good, and with him looking really good against the specific pitchers the specific pitches that Cahill throws, I would say that Baez looks to be in a good get-right spot. And then Rizzo would be overwhelmingly the best offensive player on the Cubs. The other thing that I want to add is that, I'm going to move this to just 19 for now, because it is going to be much easier to see. And I don't want to see all the weird dudes. Okay, so we have Hayward and Russell, Addison Russell, who I also want to talk about, because they are both really, really hot lately, and you could get them for really good value. So are they as good plays when it comes to everything else? Hayward is a lefty with no splits, who's been hot. But if you take a look, the pitches that he's good against is the sinker, which again, this year has been fantastic. Good for him. That means that he's going to do very well against Cahill. But almost every other pitch is going to be in the negative, except curveball, also at 2, another one of Cahill's main pitches. So this tells me that, while Hayward had been poor last year, if you sort it into 2019, where he's hit much better, his improvement has come for a large part by hitting sinkers and curveballs. So again, against Cahill, who throws mainly sinkers and curveballs, Hayward is also going to be in a great spot at a really cheap price. Addison Russell, on the other hand, is negative runs created against every pitch except for four-seam fastballs. And Cahill only throws a four-seam fastball 11% of the time, the least frequently thrown pitch for him. So while you can take a chance on Russell, and while he has been hot lately, given everything else, I would not be a fan. The splits and the pitch selection that Cahill is going to have against him. So, in summary, there are, if you look at just, and I'm going to do this too, because this is also important, you can look at just 2019 numbers, at which point you have Contreras, Hayward, and Bryant, who have done the best against the sinker, which is going to be best against Cahill. And then against the curveball, you have, Contreras and Rizzo, which again is another boost to Contreras, even though he hasn't been doing well lately. And then the changeup, who the best against this in the lineup is Schwarber and then Bryant. So we've seen Rizzo doing average against a lot of these pitchers this season, and other players do better. So it just goes to show you the ephemeral nature of this stat, but it is somewhat representative of how they do if you engage a large enough sample size. So again, I don't think that the 2019 information is as valuable when looking at longer term players, but for someone like a Hayward, who did change everything this year, I have no problem taking a look at those stats and seeing if there's a specific increase that he's shown in any one of the pitches. And as we see, the pitches that he's gotten better in are the pitches that Cahill throws. So again, Rizzo is going to be my favorite play. I think Baez is in a good get-right spot. I think Hayward is going to be in a good spot today. He's been hot and he's been profiling well against those pitchers. And then, Schwarber and Bryant are both middle of the road, but have that power upside in terms of the runs created against this. Neither of them are hot or cold. Schwarber matches up well in terms of splits, but really it's, hey, T-Pig, how's it going? But really there's not a ton of Cubs other than that are either super hot or super cold. So again, I think Cahill is a very bad pitcher, and I'm not going to be playing him. But I think the really interesting thing to look at is the Angels, because I think most people, given the Vegas total of 9, hey, how's it going, Dat? I think that most people, given the Vegas total of 9 when playing the showdown, are going to go more towards the Cubs because they're getting 5 runs and the Angels are projected to get 4. So let's take a look at John Lester. Well, John Lester is a lefty with extreme reverse splits. Thank you very much. I try very hard. No, I don't. Lester is a lefty with extreme reverse splits, which means that the best batters against him are going to be lefties with reverse splits. And while that is very rare in baseball, we have one in Tommy La Stella, who is a lefty with reverse splits, which means that if anybody is going to have a fantastic day against John Lester, yeah, man, that's right, Dat. If anyone's going to have a great game against John Lester, Tommy La Stella matches up specifically well against him. And in terms of hot and cold, like I said before, the only cold player on the Angels is Lucroy, which means you legitimately have Fletcher, Trout, Pujols, La Stella, Puelo, and Calhoun. Okay, well, now you're going a little far. I wouldn't, I mean, no, I don't want to F anything, man. It's just a border, It's the people, and the people are good for the most part everywhere. So let's look at John Lester here. John Lester has a much clearer pitch selection. 70% of his pitches are either going to be a four-seam fastball or a cut fastball. So it's okay, man. Just, my YouTube chat is not like others. I don't like that kind of negativity. I know that's hard to do in YouTube, to stop with YouTube chat. I might be punching above my weight there, but needless to say. So we have Lester, who throws a four-seam fastball and a cut fastball 70% of the time. And then like I said, you don't have to apologize. And then the pitch that he throws most often is the curveball that he throws 13% of the time. So we would look at, again, the fastball, a weighted fastball for 100, the weighted cutter for 100, and then I'm going to look at the weighted curveball as well for 100. So while an incredibly small sample size, the leader on the Angels, is Cesar Puelo, but let's ignore that because it's only 22 plate appearances. But the other one that's been really, really good against the cut fastball, but not playing today, is Ohtani. Against the fastball, but is not playing, is Ohtani. So please take note in the future when Ohtani is playing that if he's going against a four-seam fastball guy, you need to play him because his numbers against them are out of this world, better than anybody that I've seen looking at this. All right, people want to do things. Okay, so the next thing is, who else is doing that well? Mike Trout, 2 runs created against four-seam fouls. Again, not a surprise. Tommy La Stella would be next with 1.3, which isn't as good. I like 2 better, but again, anything over 1 is absolutely fantastic. Against cutters, though, is where things get a little crazy because the numbers for cutters are really much starker. For example, like I alluded to, Ohtani against four-seam fastballs creates 2.7 runs per 100 pitches. Against cutters, he loses 1.8 runs. He is that bad against cutters. We see that with La Stella, he gains 1.3 runs against four-seam fastballs. He loses 4.7 runs per 100 pitches against cutters. That is absolutely insane. Mike Trout, on the other hand, 2.29 runs created against the cutter. The one really surprising one is Jonathan Lucroy, who so far in the last couple seasons has created 6.2 runs against the cut fastball. Edgar asks, do starting pitchers use the same arsenal of pitch type as you stated 100% of the time, or does it vary? What I have looked at here is every pitch thrown in 2019. So if they threw one pitch of one type, it would get a listing of 0.1%. On the website. I am ignoring previous years because pitch selection does change. Pitchers develop new pitches. Different catchers come in. They change the amount and the rate that pitchers throw. So I'm looking at a sample size from this year that's been acceptable. They got to have at least 3-4 starts with a good amount of innings under their belt. And then I look at every pitch, everything. So John Lester in 2019 has only thrown four-seam fastballs, cut fastballs, curveballs, changeups, and sinkers. That is it. He has not thrown anything else whatsoever, not one time. So I think that, you can use that, like I said, you can use that in order to help determine more things, because the more information you have and the better you know how to use it, the better it is for you. This is about, teaching a man to fish as well as, showing you guys how I fish. Absolutely. That's what I'm here for, Edgar. The last pitch that I said I wanted to look at, because he does throw out the third most, is the curveball, and this is where it gets really interesting. So I said Tommy La Stella does very well against four-seamers and does one of the worst I've seen against cutters, but his numbers against curveballs are absolutely out of this world. I talked about, if you're over 2, you are absolutely fantastic. Again, for 100 pitches, which granted, the sample size is small, for what he has done on the Angels. He would create 8.4 runs per 100 curveball seen. So we have La Stella, who may not be the best against the cutter, understandably, but we have La Stella, who matches up in terms of splits about as good as you can, is hot enough. He's not cold, but he's right on the border of hot, and he will crush any curveball that John Lester throws him. So if you are looking at the Angels, I would obviously say Mike Trout is going to be the best running away, because Mike Trout is Mike Trout. There's a reason. And then I really do like La Stella, and I really do like Puello. So I would do what I can to fit those guys in. I think it is going to be an offensive game, and you're going to want to attack it thusly. So I don't really have anything else to say there. I went over, the pitches and what everybody throws. That's basically it. This is the kind of depth I can get into, though, when I have the time to get into like the depth of things instead of trying to get through like 15 games in an hour. So next up, we have the Dodgers and the D-backs. We're moving on to the main slate, which for something that's awesome. I've never seen this. The main slate locks at 9:40 p.m. So you have all day. I wanted to wait until the lineups came out, but if I did that, it would be 6 p.m. And that's far too late for me to do the video, because at that point I'm probably trying to get my son dinner, and he's telling me that he wants like 25 different things that we don't have in the fridge, because that is my son for you. So when looking at this game, we have two pitchers who have been kind of in the middle. Over the last couple of weeks. Neither have been hot. Neither have been really cold. Why is there? Oh, okay. They added Sadzik as the opener. Okay. You have Bueller, who had almost 10 strikeouts per 9. But, the FIP 3.8, close to 4, XFIP 3.25. And then, on top of that, the matchups have been much better for him. This against the Diamondbacks in a hitter's park is much worse. So while I wouldn't classify him as having been even mediocre, he's been better than average. I wouldn't think he's hot. I wouldn't classify him as hot. And then I certainly wouldn't say that he has a plus matchup against the D-backs here. And then on the D-back side, we have Robbie Ray, who has done some fantastic things, both in the literal sense and the figurative sense. 13.5 strikeouts per 9 is absolutely eye-opening, but so is the 5.4 walks per 9. That is really, really something else. A whip of 1.90, really, really something else. So as of right now, if you look at Roto Grinders, and you look at Awesemo has free ownership projections for today. If you want to check those out, they're better. So I do like them. Although there are things that, obviously it's still projections. So I'm going to disagree with them. but they have Nola at 57% as the most, Bueller at 44%, and Ray at 42%. So needless to say, Bueller and Ray are going to be extremely popular, two of the most popular pitchers tonight. And I think that that is actually going to be a mistake. I think that the way I'm going to separate myself from the field is to take Nola, who is the most expensive pitcher, but then to take one of the other pitchers who has a pretty decent upside today. And I'll talk about that later. So what we have here is Robbie Ray, who is going against a hot Dodgers team that's going to get 5 runs in a hitter's park. Excuse me. On top of that, as I explained in my article, the Dodgers strike out the 3rd least in baseball and walk one of the most in baseball. And this is a guy that needs strikeouts and cannot walk people if he wants to have even a decent start. It's certainly possible that Robbie Ray blows everybody away today. At 40% ownership, but I would be I wouldn't be surprised at all, I should say, if Robbie Ray winds up walking home a run in the 1st inning and they wind up having to take him out early. Robbie Ray's control is that bad, and the Dodgers offense truly is that good. So I think that, if you take everything into consideration, the Dodgers are going to be one of my favorite stacks on the day. And it's going to be, pretty stark. I really do like both teams in the Houston and Seattle game, but I think that given how popular Robbie Ray is, the best way to create leverage against him, especially in small slates like this, is to stack bats against those popular pitchers. So I do love taking the Dodgers today. Freese has been on fire. Bellinger has been on fire. Muncy is an extreme reverse splits lefty going against a lefty, so that's nice for him. Seager's been on fire lately. Taylor, Kike, and Turner are both right on the cusp of being on fire. And as we talked about, before, Ray is bad enough with his control that any one of these guys can take a ball that wasn't supposed to go over the plate and knock it out of this park. So I really, really do like the Dodgers. I think they are very much underrated today. They are going to go very underowned, and the pricing on top of that is pretty significantly low. Bellinger at 5,800, no one's going to be shocked at that, but if you look at the last lineup they put out against a lefty, Freese leading off would be 4,000, Turner 4,300, then Chris Taylor at 3,400, Kike Hernandez at 3,900 batting 5th, and then you could get a catcher, Will Smith, assuming he's playing. He's the better offensive option over Russell Martin lately at only 2,700. So you can get Cody Bellinger and then 4 other bats here and still not break your bank at all. So I would not be averse to doing that, even if you are only playing one lineup, even if you are playing cash. I also want to talk about the pitch selection. Robbie Ray really throws 2 pitches now, a 4-seam fastball and a slider. He does occasionally dip into a curveball and a sinker, but for the most part, it's 4-seam fastball and slider, which is why he has extreme normal splits. As I've explained before, the more heavily you throw a slider, generally speaking, the worse you are against the opposite hand, because when pitches break in, it's easier for you to hit. And that's what happens when you throw a slider to the opposite-handed person. So who are the best on the Dodgers against 4-seam fastballs? Right now, we have Max Muncy, who again has the splits on his back, 2.4 runs created over 100 pitches, Freese 2.3, and then Turner 1.8. All of those are fantastic numbers, and all 3 of those are in really, really good spots today. And then if you look at sliders, Freese, again, he faces lefties generally. So lefties, he's going to see sliders mainly from lefties. And there's nothing wrong with that, because he creates 4.3 runs per 100 sliders he sees. So both of the pitches that Robbie Ray throws, on top of the fact that Freese is hot as anything right now, on top of the fact that the splits all line up for him, means that Freese is going to be even just as a one-off, one of the top plays on the slate. I have absolutely no problem whatsoever locking him in, especially if you're going with the stack. You're not wasting a first base position, especially because you can just play Bellinger in the outfield if you want. But I would really, really like to see both of those guys. And then the second best Dodger hitter against sliders is Cody Bellinger, who creates almost 2 runs per 100 sliders seen. So again, Freese and Bellinger are going to be 2 fantastic plays. Muncy does really well and lines up in terms of his splits and in terms of the fastball selection that Robbie Ray throws. And then you can really pick a bunch of the other right-handed bats, especially Turner, who does create runs on both sliders and four-seam fastballs. I think all of those choices are going to be fantastic, and I'm going to focus on taking those Dodgers bats today because they really are going to be under-owned. Next up, we want to look at the D-backs. Walker Buehler has a much more not confusing. It's a much more difficult to predict pitch selection, I'd say. He throws his four-seam fastball about 60% of the time. So we can absolutely look at that. But then his secondary pitch really does change situationally. There's nothing really that stands out. So what we want to do is look at four-seam fastball, and then that's basically it, and see who gets an edge. But I wouldn't say that it gives them an overwhelming advantage, as it were, because again, he can hit you with a slider, a cutter, a curveball, a sinker, or a changeup, which he does throw at various levels, but none of those over 12%. So like I said, there's no way to predict what that pitch selection is going to be, and the Dodgers are a good enough team to exploit the weaknesses of the specific batter they're going against. So if he is weak against sliders, we shouldn't expect him to see a curveball. We would expect him to see a slider, right? So the only thing we should generally see is fastball, four-seam fastballs. So the Diamondbacks who create the most value off of four-seam fastballs is Vargas, who doesn't have a very high sample size, so I'm not comfortable with that number. Carson Kelly, same deal, not a big sample size. And then the best is Eduardo Escobar, who only gets 1.35. Not terrible, but not in the realm of, pushing that needle a long way for us. So Walker Buehler is in a decent spot today. But like I explained in the article, while I think the Diamondbacks are my 4th out of 6th favorite stack here, Buehler is hittable enough, and the Diamondbacks are good enough that I would consider them as a GPP play. And if I'm playing 150 lineups, I am certainly going to have some exposure. Although, again, my main 3 stacks today are going to be the Dodgers, the Mariners, and the Astros. Moving on. Ooh, I'm getting a message. Let's see. Okay. That is something else. Okay, so let's move on to the second of the 3 games today. Phillies at the Padres. This is one where I am focusing on the pitchers. Nola is my favorite pitcher on the slate. Lauer is my second favorite pitcher on the slate, considering price. And I am basically going to start my lineups with these 2 guys. If you look at the lineups page, and again, I implore you to check it out, especially while I'm doing this video, you see a field of whatever that maroony purple color is. Segura is cold, Real Muto is cold, Franco is cold, Garcia is cold, Machado is cold, Myers is cold, and Hedges is cold. That is almost half of the batters that we're going to have to play with on this team, meaning that both pitchers are going to be in fantastic spots. And unlike the Cardinals, if you saw yesterday's lineup page, this is not a question of like 4 guys are hot and 3 guys are cold. The only 2 batters who are hot in this entire game are Bryce Harper and Hunter Renfroe. I talked about it in my article, and I think it's worth pointing out again. Bryce Harper was cold as anything. He has been heating up in a major way, and Eric Lauer is a lefty with reverse splits, meaning he is weaker against lefties. So this is a prime spot to get Bryce Harper even as a one-off, and he is going to be relatively ignored by everybody else because lefty on lefty matchup, and they're going to focus on stacking, especially on a smaller slate. But I think that it would behoove you today to do a 5-2-1 or a 4-3-1 or something along those lines, and have that one be a Bryce Harper, because he is really, really a fantastic play today. Apart from being hot, I will also point out the pitches. So where is it? Okay, so that's the wrong thing. Oh, never mind. I was looking at the wrong number there. Regardless, I will say that Bryce Harper still does match up well against Eric Lauer, who throws a four-seam fastball 50% of the time. He hits the four-seam fastball very well, and it's not going to have the movement that's going to be really tricky to him. Even the cutter isn't going to move that much, even though Bryce Harper does not do that well against cutters. So, it is something to be careful about. But as I said before, everything else lines up really, really nicely. And I think that even if you're not going to play the Phillies stack, which I'm not going to do by any stretch, I think Bryce Harper's a fantastic one-off. On the other side, Eric Lauer, if you sort by FIP, Eric Lauer has been the best pitcher over the last couple of weeks. As I explained again in my article, his stats are not a joke over the last couple of weeks on this slate. He has been pitching just as well as the guys over 9,000, and for some reason he's priced in the lower 7,000s. His 8 strikeouts per nine, not fantastic, but good enough to get you points. He has walked 0 people, by far the best on the slate. He's given up 0.73 home runs per nine, which is tied for the best on the slate with Aaron Nola. A whip of 0.65, which is the best on the slate. His FIP 2.91, which is the best on the slate. His XFIP of 3.40, which is the second best on the slate. And his Sierra is 3.33, which would be the best on the slate if you ignore the opener for the Angels. So Eric Lauer has been doing really, really well lately. And like I said, he's going against a cold Phillies team that, apart from Harper, has just not been hitting well recently. They are projected to get 4 runs, if that slightly under 4 runs, and they are going to a huge hitter's park in San Diego. So again, give me the Eric Lauer and I will avoid the Phillies. On the other side, as I said, Nola has been the second best pitcher, quote unquote, over the last couple weeks, although the 10.2 strikeouts per nine might give him the edge. Everything else is just about where it is with Lauer, including the home runs per nine. He just has been giving up more walks. So Nola has looked fantastic. The Padres strike out one of the most in the major leagues. He should be priced over 10,000. I talked at the beginning of the season many, many times about how Nola came in third for the Cy Young Award. And if he had been, if he had gotten first or second place votes, it wouldn't have been crazy. And if he pitches as well as he did last year, this year, without Scherzer and DeGrom pitching as well as they did last year, he would certainly have the chance to win the Cy Young this year. So he's been in great form, and everything really does work out for him, especially given the fact that lefties are really the only ones that are going to be able to hit him really hard. And pretty much everybody on the Padres is cold as ice. So Nola for 9,600 is the most expensive pitcher. He's going to be the highest owned pitcher. But don't think that pivoting down to a pitcher that's getting 10% less ownership, like a Walker Buehler or a Robbie Ray, that comes with much more risk, is going to be a better play unless you are mass entering. Nola, would have to be 30% more owned than somebody else for me to say that based on ownership, you need to get the hell off of him. So Nola and Lauer, fantastic, fantastic plays today. I love them both dearly, and I'm going to be, if I play multiple lineups, I'm going to be above the field on those two guys as well as the Dodgers. The last game I want to talk about is the Astros and the Seattle Mariners. We have Corbin Martin taking on Wade LeBlanc. So the ownership for Corbin Martin is projected to be at about 20%, according to Awesemo. I would say that is reasonable, or excuse me. That's not the right wording. I would say that 20% is a correct guess, is a reasonable guess. But I think that ownership even is far too high. Martin has looked absolutely awful over his last few starts. The 9 strikeouts per 9, always good, but almost every single pitcher on this, oh, excuse me. The only pitcher pitching today who doesn't have that upside is John Lester, and he's not pitching on this slate. So every single pitcher on this slate has that 9 strikeouts per 9 upside. His walks 5.14 with a 2.14 whip, but unlike Robbie Ray, he's not getting it done in other ways. The 7.71 ERA is bad enough, but that's a 10.29 FIP. So even though he's pitching poorly with a 7.71 ERA, he's still getting lucky, and with a much worse Astros team behind him, missing Correa, missing Altuve, missing Springer, missing even Aledmus Diaz. Those are all good defenders. Replacing them with a Miles Straw and a Tyler White and a Jack Mayfield just isn't going to be the same, both offensively in terms of his prospects for getting a win and in terms of defensively. I've talked before about how, ERA, it may not be the most predictive of all stats, but it still shows you what a pitcher is working with. And he is working with a much worse team behind him. Granted, a much worse team that on the backs of Bregman and Brantley still wound up sweeping the A's in Oakland. But I'm going to get to that in a minute. I think what we need to talk about first is how Martin is going to be 20% owned. And I think that it, again, much like with the Dodgers, it would behoove you to take Mariners here. I would project the Astros, given the highest total on the board, to be the highest owned team on the board. But given, again, the projected ownerships and everything else, I would much rather have the Dodgers and the Mariners and then the Astros if I'm playing one lineup. Obviously, if you're playing multiple lineups, you're going to spread it around. So Corbin Martin has been pitching terribly. He's going to be over-owned because, as I have explained in the past, people get this like immediate imprint on them. When someone does good their first start, if they were supposed to do good that start, or they come up and they're a good prospect, people automatically assume like, oh, okay, that's him doing it right. So if he does poorly, those are flukes, and he'll get right next time. But there's nothing indicating that that's going to happen. All we can see is that against worse teams than the Mariners, Martin has been unable to perform in any way. He has not been able to, get through and out in the 5th inning, and that's just not someone that we're going to be able to count on when Eric Lauer is going against a team that's going to get a run less. He's been pitching better, is in a better ballpark against a worse offense. So, I just think that I would rather spend the extra $200 and take Eric Lauer than a Corbin Martin that's flailing. And on top of that, the 20% ownership on Martin, which might even be a little too low, given his price and the upside that he has, is going to reduce the ownership on the Mariners. So the Mariners team is one where they have nobody that's cold. They have only one hot hitter, Edwin Encarnacion, but everyone else is cold. But that one is fantastic. I would say that if you are not playing Freeze as your first baseman, play Edwin Encarnacion as your first baseman. I will say that because I pay attention to who's hot and cold every day. So I know that 4 days ago, and Edwin Encarnacion was one of the coldest hitters in baseball. His WOBA was under 200. His OPS was absolutely nothing. And in a 4-game stretch, he managed to get himself as one of the hotter hitters in baseball. That means that he is on fire streaky right now. And that is exactly when you want to ride Encarnacion. So what I would do, again, my favorite stacks are the Dodgers and the Mariners. If I'm playing the Dodgers, I want Freeze at first base. If I'm playing the Mariners, I want Encarnacion at first base. If I'm playing the Astros, pick one. But if I'm playing the Astros stack, I'm not playing Tyler White at first base. I'm not going to play Yuli Gurriel at first base. I will play either Encarnacion or Freeze as my first baseman. So again, we have Malik Smith, who's been hitting really well, has everything lined up for him in terms of splits. Haniger is a reverse splits righty going against a righty, so that is better for him. Domingo Santana has been doing really well. Kyle Seager is playing third base, is 3,400 on DraftKings and 2,600 on FanDuel. His price just has not corrected since he came back from the injured list. Especially if he bets higher than sixth. At 3,400 at sixth is crazy enough, but they've been playing him second in the order a lot of times. Granted, that was when Malik Smith wasn't batting leadoff. They were playing Haniger leadoff then, but we haven't seen the lineup. If it comes out and Kyle Seager's batting second, 3,400 for that third baseman is almost a lock. The only cause for concern I would have is on the other side of this game, and let's talk about that right now. Wade LeBlanc has actually been decent over the last couple weeks. 8.1 strikeouts per nine. Again, not fantastic, but certainly not bad. It is absolutely workable, and that will get you more than enough points to make up for a $5,000 price tag on DK. 0.9 walks per nine with a 1.20 whip, and then he's going down the stairs. Which is what you want to see from a pitcher. It means he's been getting unlucky. 6.3 ERA, 4.25 FIP, 3.37 xFIP. So again, this is not someone who's going to be, burning any barns down with his stuff. He's not someone who's going to be absolutely fantastic day in and day out. He's not someone who's going to slowly work his way up to the 10,000 price range, but he is someone that is $5,000 who should, without any problem, get you 15 DKP today. And I say that because of one very important thing, and that is, as annoying as it is, the Mariners are using an opener. The only two hitters on the Astros that are worth anything right now are Bregman and Brantley. Chirinos has been okay, but he's cooling off. He's on the cooling off end of being hot, not the getting hot end of being hot. So while I absolutely love Bregman and Brantley today and would play them even if I was playing LeBlanc, especially on this small slate, LeBlanc is not going to have to face them. They are going to have Connor Sadzik pitch to the 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 guy, depending on how he does, and then LeBlanc's going to come in. So if that happens, LeBlanc's going to start with a lefty in Josh Reddick, unless the guy gets the 1, 2, 3. But either way, if LeBlanc pitches decently enough, he's not going to get Bregman and Brantley until the, until the 4th or 5th inning. And then that's probably it. He's only going to have to face the 2 guys in the lineup once because they're going to use an opener to get past that hurdle for him at the start. If he was starting the game outright, I would still think 5,000 is too cheap for him and his upside, but I would like him less. The fact that they are intentionally using a starter so that he doesn't have to face Bregman and Brantley and comes in against the dumpster fire that is the bottom half of this Astros lineup means that for 5,000, Wade LeBlanc is a fantastic punt play today, even though I would still want to play Bregman and Brantley in almost every single lineup I play today. It's just a question of price at that point. 5,000 lets you play. You could play him and Nola and then fit in the best bat at every position and still have money left over. Maybe with one punt, but regardless, it might be a slight exaggeration, but the point stands. You get Wade LeBlanc, who should be priced in the 7,000 range with Lauer, $2,000 cheaper than he should be, given his recent form and given the state of this Astros team. This is an Astros team that you would normally never play a lefty against, but this is not, Springer, Altuve, Correa, Diaz, all lefty mashers. All of them are out right now. Miles Straw is batting leadoff. I don't know what else I have to say. Miles Straw is batting leadoff. You might say, hey, Bathrobe, did you make that name up? Maybe. Did I? Do you know? That's how bad it is. I don't know, maybe. Anyway, so that's going to be it for today. Unless anybody has any questions, I am going to get off and go give my wife a hug before she takes off for work. So thank you all for joining me. if you have any other questions, I'll be back at this tomorrow. I'll be online, do what I got to do. Thank you all again. I love you all. Have a beautiful day. And I'll see you all tomorrow.